Hello, Christina.
Hey, how are you all?
We're brilliant, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Great. Been looking forward to this.
Thank you so much for joining us. Ben joined the call there and just started boasting about how sunny it was outside. We're stuck in the studio for 24 hours. So.
That is so peak. Yeah, today's like the first time that it's actually been properly sunny this week. So you're missing out.
Listen, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick recap on everything that we're doing. We've been doing this for 5 hours now, which is pretty impressive. That we're
feeling good so far.
Yeah. All right. 5 hours. Yeah. Almost a quarter of the way. 19 hours to go.
Can we stop doing that? When we refer to time, can we only mention how far we've come, not how long we've got left to go? Because when we talk about how long we've got left, and it contextualizes it, it makes it all the more difficult.
I know. I'm sorry. I was like kind of doing it as a joke for you, but it massively impacted me. So, listen, a massive thank you. Yeah, so obviously we're doing this podcast for 24 hours, raising funds for the Diana Award. The whole nature of the conversation that we've been having all day so far is all about what we can do to normalize talking about our mental health, what we can do to promote charitable work, things that amazing people like yourself are doing within our communities. And we really just want to find out all about you. Everyone that's been watching or is going to watch this back will be so keen to find out about some of the amazing work that you've been doing. And yeah, we're so excited to have you here.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the space and the platform that you've given me. So for some background, my name is Christina Adane. I'm a student and campaigner, and I was co-chair of an organisation fighting the injustices of the food industry called Fight Back 2030. It was co-founded by Jamie Oliver, and we do loads and loads of campaigns. One of my most kind of famous ones being the extension of free school meal provisions over the half term, which extended into the longer term campaign to end child food poverty. And that was then taken on by Marcus Rashford, and we all know the story from there. We've also done a lot of stuff on junk food marketing, sports sponsorship. It's a really interesting space to be in, and food just generally does so much for our mental health, and it's a very underrated topic when talking about a lot of the social issues that we have today. Bite Back 2030 is really cool. Definitely go check them out.
Oh, brilliant. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction as well. I don't know whether this is going to, depends how humble you are, an embarrassing introduction, but you were in the BBC's 100 most inspiring and influential women in the world.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. How we were going to get to that a little bit later on, and how what that meant to you. But let's go back. Let's go back to upbringing. So upbringing in Westminster in London. We read a couple pieces on that the campaigning started when you were back in primary school, 11 years old. Tell us a little bit about that, about your upbringing, and when maybe some of this overall life mission, or you started to discover this purpose and all these kind of ideas started to form.
Yeah, so when I was 11, the Ebola crisis happened in West Africa, and I remember watching on the news what was going on. It was a school morning. My mum was like crying her eyes out, and I couldn't understand it, like why those children, like African children that look like me, that parents that looked like my parents, why they were suffering so much and going through all of that with no access to medicine, doctors, the same kind of resources that we have in this country. And when I started asking those questions, which were very simple, like the fact that these kids like didn't have access to the most basic supplies, I got really angry. I got super angry. So then I went to school that day and I was like, we need to do something about this. And I hosted a pajama day at school. I hosted assemblies trying to explain what was going on, to essentially raise money. We had a baking competition and we raised like over £700. And like, as great as that was, and obviously like at that age I was like, oh my gosh, £700, like this is so much. it was just like my first kind of step into the world of kind of campaigning and activism, but it also just really highlighted to me how unjust the world is and how much work there needs to be done. And like as a young person, I've always felt kind of burdened with that since that first kind of like awakening when I was 11 years old. And I think it's not right that so many young people, especially today, like, you know, whether it be through climate justice, racial justice, whatever it is, like so many of us spend so much of our time on these issues because like other people aren't really doing what they need to do to solve them. But then again, you know, it's also just incredible seeing, you know, people like Ben just doing so much and like impacting so many people's lives. So yeah.
You mentioned there about almost like an awakening. Do you feel as if this was like written, not to get too spiritual, but almost like written for you? Do you feel as if the Ebola crisis hadn't happened when you're 11 years old, that there would have been then just something else that you maybe would have really felt this injustice that maybe other people wouldn't have taken as much notice on, and that would have been the catalyst for this movement?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why I was almost surprised by myself when food was the issue that I settled on, because like there have been so many things that I've just been like, how is this fair? Like, how is this right? And like, I need to do something about it. And I always feel an urge to do something. That's why like I use the word burden, because like a lot of us young people that feel called to social action just feel like there are so many issues that we have to act on. But yeah, it was kind of like a calling to speak out. I just didn't know what it would be about, what exactly I would devote my time and energy to. But now I know.
And now like what's happened. Tell us about how everything started with Jamie Oliver.
So I was doing work experience at Ep8, an amazing charity that kind of help with like communications and improving debating skills in schools. And I was just talking about food to my manager there, because I had just started like researching about climate like injustice, going to the protests, and yeah, I was just kind of like, do I go vegan? I don't know what to do. Do I cut out meat? And at that time I had such an individualist view when like looking at problems and how to solve them. I didn't think of it as a systemic kind of issue. So he was like, oh, you should apply to this organization that Jamie's setting up. So I applied, not really thinking much of it. And then a couple months later, yeah, I was like helping set up the organization. And then a couple months after that, I became co-chair. So yeah, it was very like kind of unexpected. But then a lot of it just kind of made sense and fell into place, especially like my upbringing in London, living in a food desert, like being on free school meals, all these things that I never really thought about, because you don't really think about food, you take it for granted so much. But yeah, just realizing all these invisible kind of injustices really like motivated me to kind of, yeah, join the board and work with Jamie and with the other young people there.
Did it ever overwhelm you? Sorry, or was it more of a case of you understood quite quickly that we needed to take action and create positive change, and you wanted to be a part of that, so that's what happened? Or was it quite a lot of like soaking it in, or there's quite a lot that needs to be done here, how can I help, where's my energy best going to be, you know, used? What was that journey like for you? Was it quite quick for yourself, or was it one that took a bit longer?
I think it was when there are like campaigns that I have to work on, I just completely like, you know, tunnel vision, just completely focused on the campaign. And then after it's done, I'm like, I look back, and then that's when I get the kind of weight of emotions and like I feel overwhelmed. But I think it's a balance. Like you have to be positive and be optimistic when it comes to campaigning, but you always feel overwhelmed. Like you're going against some of the biggest food companies in the world, right? Like, and also there's so many, like even with, I don't know if you guys have seen the junk food ban being delayed like yesterday. Like even with stuff like that, it's a campaign that we've worked so hard on, and like we've campaigned for so long about it, and we've got that win and we think we have it in the bag, and then suddenly it's like brought into question again, and then he announced again that, you know, it's actually secured and it's going to happen, and now he's once again said that it's delayed. So it's like a tug of emotions all the time, and you will feel overwhelmed, but you still have to remain positive. It's just a balance. Yeah.
How do you juggle that roller coaster of emotions of like, you think you've got something in the bag and then it gets snatched away from you and you have to, you know, bite your tongue a little bit and just wait a bit longer or work a bit harder? How do you manage that? Do you allow yourself to enjoy the wins, or is it one of them where you can't really enjoy it because you think it could be taken away from you?
No, I do enjoy it, because if I don't enjoy it, then it's just a bit depressing, isn't it? Like you fight and kind of campaign so long for nothing, and it's not for nothing. That's the point. Even the fact that like a bunch of young people can create legislative change is insane in itself, and that is something that needs to be celebrated. But I think at the same time, you've got to be kind of wary, and you need to like understand the opposition and understand like why things might be the way they are. But it just gives you more drive at the end of the day, because we were so close. Like we essentially tasted the success, so we're going to keep going. So yeah.
That's incredible. I think we can get that feeling of how passionate you are about fighting for these causes. So when you first started feeling this injustice from a young age, I know you referenced the Ebola crisis, did anyone try to dissuade you from walking down that path to campaign for these movements? Because I think earlier on in the broadcast, Dan had touched on, you know, when it comes to recycling, people don't recycle because they feel like they're just one person. What impact are they going to have? Where it feels like you've had the opposite effect of that. You've went out and said, I need to be that one person that's going to drive forward that change. So when you started feeling this injustice, just to summarize my question again, did anyone try and put you off from fighting these campaigns and going down that path?
Yeah, definitely. I think age is a huge kind of factor in like why people think I wasn't capable, or, you know, that I should just shut up until like I get a degree or something like that. But I think I never think it's from a bad place. It's just that we've become so disenfranchised that we believe that we don't have any power. And, you know, the idea that someone would go against the grain and actually stand up for something is quite like shocking, and quite it's something, you know, you need to wrap your head around, particularly when it's not just like a social media repost or something like that. Like when it's actually, you're gonna like actually put yourself out there and dedicate like your time, your energy, you're gonna join an organization. That is a huge thing. And I did have people be like, you know, you should just focus on your education, or even just the kind of fact that I've been kind of written off just in terms of like my identity, like coming from, you know, a family of immigrants, being a Black woman, all that kind of stuff. It plays on your mind, and you think that, oh no, like this isn't for me. Like I'm not supposed to be one of these people, you know, like I'm not supposed to be a Greta Thunberg or whatever. But it's not really about that. It's about collective movement. And if you can drive that collective movement, then you should speak out. And it doesn't matter what you look like, whatever identity you are, how you see yourself. It's literally just about the message. And I think that's what's so important. Like the reason why young people like myself speak up about the things we care about is because of the issue. It's about the message that we want to push forward. It's not about us as kind of individuals. So when people try and like kind of talk me out of doing things, and just like, no, because it's not about like me, it's about what I'm trying to change. So yeah.
I massively agree when it comes to that. And I think like as long as you're focused on that overall mission, like you said, you're one person, yes, you're driving it, but the most important thing is the mission, and is making this change. But what I do wonder is there'll be a lot of people thinking and not doing. And maybe one of the reasons that they aren't doing things is because they're scared of receiving criticism. But would you agree that, although I know you're saying it's not about you, it's about the mission, receiving some of that criticism, it will just that add fuel to the fire for even more for you to be like, right, well, this just proves how much I need to do this because there's so much that I need to change. So in a roundabout way, it could potentially be a beneficial thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think a great example of that is when talking about obesity, because one of our aims is to halve child obesity. A lot of the people that you're trying to help just don't want to receive that help because they have those stigmas within themselves that, talking about food and obesity is like an individual's problem. You should blame the parents or you should blame the people for eating so much, and it's not a systemic thing. And so you get a lot of criticism for speaking up, and you're like, people tell you that you're wasting your time. People tell you that, you're just, I don't know, you're part of some conspiracy or oh, sorry, don't know where you went. So when you kind of get that feedback from the people that you're trying to help, you're doing something right because you're challenging those kind of subtle stereotypes and built-in kind of prejudices that they have against themselves. And I think that's where the change really starts, when we start unlearning things together and really just shifting that kind of narrative of issues from individual to systemic.
What do you think it is? Because obviously society has a reaction to a lot of things, but what is it about food and nutrition that everyone goes mad about? Because it first happened with Jamie Oliver, didn't it? And parents almost felt, is threatened the right word? I think you kind of touched on it there, that's making them potentially ask themselves difficult questions that they don't want to ask. What's the issue? Why do you think some people are so either oblivious to things or so reluctant to change?
I think it's because when food is such a personal thing, I mean, there's so many different layers to the issue, but one is just cultural and like tradition, right? Like people don't want their culture and traditions to be threatened, and food is such an integral part of that. So I think with Jamie, one of the things that he might have missed with his campaigns earlier on was that that he wasn't really made to seem sensitive of that. Like I remember was it jerk rice that like he got cussed out for? Like there's certain things that people don't feel like they can identify or that they're being heard with kind of food. And so it's all about inclusivity and like changing what healthy looks like, because people think healthy is a bowl of leaves, right? And obviously they're not going to want that. So changing the narrative of what nutrition means, I think, is so important. But also talking to low-income families and working in like just community centers, you see that parents just want to like provide for their kids. That's all they want to do, and they try their hardest. And so when there are people, in Parliament saying that the working class are lazy and that working class families aren't doing enough, of course they're going to feel threatened by anyone that's trying to help them or trying to whatever, because they feel like they can't ask for help, otherwise they're seen as weak, or they're seen as that they can't provide for their families. And so a lot of it is just genuinely like it's genuine, it's true, and you can't blame the parents for how they kind of feel on that. And it's about ways in which we destigmatize food and destigmatize the relationship that families have with food. And that's, as I said earlier, by changing the narrative, but also things like free school meals, making sure that's universal, because then you don't have the kind of stigma of who's on free school meals and who's not. It's just everyone receives nutritious meals every single day. And there's so many other things you can do and ways you can go about it, but I think it's just such a kind of taboo topic, which is so weird because we have it every day. But yeah,
it's a bit similar to what we just spoke to Ben about, because this is obviously the mental health side. When it comes to us in this room, we are mental health and exercise, but what is combined all those things is exercise and fitness, and nutrition plays a massive part in that. And as a previous personal trainer, there was so much that I had to undo. It is when it comes to diet culture, when it comes to perception of nutrition, because of what we've been force fed. Excuse the pun. I wrote that in a document yesterday, didn't I? Of this is misinformation by society, by the media and television, magazines, whatever it is. And so then that's been happening for generations. That's now deeply embedded in people's belief system. So even when we try to teach them something different or try to teach them the right way of doing it, they question that. They don't then give it 100% effort, then they fall back onto what they did before. And it's just this very vicious cycle. Do you, this isn't the assuming that this is a part of your mission, by the way, or suggesting that it should be. I'm purely curious again from the fitness industry standpoint. Do you feel as if you can have an impact on that? Because this is a huge thing that needs to be tackled. And if we can get that education in from a younger age, hopefully then this will be able to totally change people's belief systems, awareness, understanding, and relationship of food as they grow into adults.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think to your first point, James, the CEO of Bite Back, one of the best pieces of advice he's given me in campaigning has been, people need to hear things at least 3 times for them to start actually listening to you. So it's really all about, that's why Bite Back's a 10-year campaign, because we have to keep repeating the same simple messages again and again and again for people to actually start understanding it. And that's, it's on all levels. It's government, it's corporates, it's your everyday families and just individuals. And it's ourselves as well. In campaigning, we don't get everything right. And, we kind of need to unlearn things and we have our own mistakes. So I think it's definitely important to remember that, we need to tell each other things multiple times for it to actually sink in. And yes, I think food and fitness, it's a really interesting relationship, because when I was growing up, I was always told that if you want to be healthy, you have to be fit and you have to go on a run and whatever. And the only reference to kind of food was the Eat Well plate, which just it's not really a vibrant way of teaching young people about nutrition. And so I think if more emphasis was placed on nutrition and a positive relationship with food with young people from a younger age, then the fitness part would just naturally come in, I think, because I think PE is great, and in schools, there's a lot of emphasis on activity nowadays, but there's still not that emphasis on food and the education of it, but also just the inclusiveness, including young people in the journey of food and appreciating that in itself just gets people active, and not just in a classroom. I think it has such a close and sensitive relationship, but there's loads of emphasis on one and not on the other. But yeah, that's from my standpoint in food. I'm not sure if it aligns with your experiences.
Yeah, I think this leads me on to my next question, which I think for us is maybe a self-explanatory answer, but for anyone listening, they might not know it. I'm going to ask Danny first, because Danny, you've been on an interesting relationship nutritionally over the course of the last couple of years. What's the importance of nutrition and the way that it makes you feel when it comes to your routine, when it comes to your mental health, and when it just comes to how you kind of carry yourself? Because you've obviously, again, you've got a great relationship with your nutrition.
I think it's like anything. If we look for comparison and we look for someone else's template, that's probably not a good first step. So you referenced the Eat Well plate, and I think the second you put something in front of someone and say, this is how it's done, and then if that doesn't align with you or it doesn't feel right, then you're going to feel shameful or guilt, or why isn't it working for me, or why am I still overweight, or so I think trying to figure out what works best for you should be the first step. If that looks like being a vegan, then be vegan. If that looks like having meat 2-3 times a week, then do that, and for me, I think my first kind of awareness of nutrition came from when I started going to the gym and wanted to change the way I looked physically. So I was like, right, I need to eat more protein and have more chicken and that kind of stuff. And I had no idea that I was building a negative relationship with food, because I wasn't eating for pleasure or eating for any other reason other than to change the way I looked, which obviously sounds ridiculous saying out loud now, but we can eat for so many reasons: to spend time with family, to learn new recipes, to learn new cultures, and loads of other positive, impacts that we can have surrounding food and nutritional choices. But my journey started off very I was just looking at, I want to get big. I want to get big muscles. So I've got to eat like loads of chicken and fish and steak for breakfast and eggs and that kind of stuff. So it started off unhealthy, but now I'm at a point now where, and I've trialed a few different kind of ways of eating, and I'm now at a point where I'm vegetarian. So I don't eat fish or meat. And I find that suits me best. Doesn't suit everybody best, but that suits me best. I enjoy my food the most when I'm just veggie. I've tried being vegan, and it's not that I don't enjoy it as much. It's just where I'm at on my journey. I don't know enough about veganism to make it a sustainable life choice yet. I probably will in the future. It's something I aim to do. But where I'm at right now with my current knowledge, vegetarianism suits me best right now. I think if we can stress that what suits you right now is dependent on a lot of other factors, you've just got to be aware of those factors and figure out what suits you best. And that's probably a better way to start than, here's the Eat Well plate, follow that. Because like you said, Christina, we're living in an obesity epidemic, and it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And it starts with education, it starts with awareness, and it starts with understanding what it is we're putting into our bodies. And there's people out here at this very moment who have very unhealthy relationships with food, who were just like myself 3 or 4 years ago, that thought that in order to be healthy, I had to eat chicken, vegetables, and rice 3 times a day. And although you might get a physical result from that, you might get a physical change from that, you might have a really unhealthy relationship with food. You might actually hate chicken, you might hate rice, and you might hate the vegetables that you're choosing to eat. But if Arnold Schwarzenegger is eating it, then it's got to be good, right? So I think it's about redefining what it is to be eating healthily. It's not just about how it can change our physical appearance, it's how does it make us feel. Do our family enjoy the same foods? Because that's going to be a big factor. Can we spend time with the people that we like spending time with whilst eating? Are these flavors are these kind of ingredients that are reflective of the culture that we're maybe from? Does that make us feel better about the choices that we're having and making? So there's all these other things going on with nutrition, and we like to simplify things, don't we? Especially in Western society and Western culture, we like to simplify everything, but it is a bit of a journey, and I would advise everyone to try and go on that journey and try and discover things they do like, don't like, different cultures that they might prefer to eat foods from, and all these kind of things. Explore veganism, pescatarianism, explore having a day of the week where you don't eat meat, and then you might like it, but we're so deep, we talked earlier about how, some of our beliefs are really like deep rooted and embedded in our heads, and they're set generations ago almost, and we need to try and unpack those and undo those, and then maybe start from scratch, and that can give us a good chance at solving this epidemic.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Would you agree, Christine? And what does, on top of that as well, it sounds like such a basic question, but I know the answer that you might give. What does nutrition mean to you? What impact can it have on people's lives?
I think the impact is so obvious from such a young age. Like when you look at nutrition in schools, and schools that maybe are in food deserts, where there are more lower income like families and households, that and there's like, when you look at the environment, even you've got chicken shops and corner shops and kebab shops, and that's all that's accessible. The lack of nutrition is completely evident in the outcomes that the kids get at school. It's evident in obviously the diseases and how they look and how they feel. I think there was a documentary about like how energy drinks impacted young people in classrooms. Like there's so much that you can just tell by kids that are being well fed and kids that aren't. And my kind of the bit that kind of upsets me is that it's always linked to wealth and how wealthy the kid is. So if they have parents that can afford nutritious food, if they can afford to kind of have that lifestyle, then they're just so much better off, just life prospects wise, which is insane. Because I was twice as likely to develop obesity growing up, because I live in a food desert, which means that I'm likely to develop heart disease, liver disease, and that's just because of my environment. It's not even because of the choices I make, it's because of the environment around me. And so health shouldn't be a postcode lottery, nutrition shouldn't be a postcode lottery. And that's why I think it's so important. And, you know, adding on to Dan's point, I think like being able to kind of explore, you know, what nutrition looks like to you, what your diet, you know, can be, and the potential of that, I think is such an important thing that we should all experience. But that can only happen once those options are actually available to us, especially young people, because as long as chicken and chips is still £2, and you know, a healthy, you know, whatever, a Leon prep, whatever, as long as that's double, triple that price, young people are always going to go to the chicken and chips. That's not them choosing, it's that being the only option there, if that makes sense.
I've got a question from Vicky, and this is interesting because it's going to be like the third time I've asked this question today. It's all, we keep on going talking about the younger generation, but then referring back to the parents and what can they do to ensure that the support networks at home. So Vicky said, this is so interesting. As a parent, it's a constant learning curve teaching teenagers healthy nutritional eating. Apologies, it wasn't a question. I'm turning it into a question. What sort of things can parents do? What's your best advice?
I think this is really interesting. I haven't been asked this. I think there's kind of a innate reaction that teenagers have to like go against whatever their parents say. So my don't would be, don't kind of shove it down their throats and be like, this is what you should eat and this is what you don't. And also no food is bad. Like you can have a burger, you can have whatever as part of a balanced diet. So try not to like demonize certain foods or make, you know, kids feel bad for eating certain foods. I'd definitely say what you should do is make them question the environment around them. So why is there a chicken shop or a kebab shop 400 meters from their school? You know, why are they being bombarded every time they open a social media app from like, you know, delivery apps and fast food takeaways? Like, point out the environment, and then they'll be able to see for themselves and reach the conclusion for themselves that this is actually like not fair and it's unjust. And then once you see it as like a kind of social justice issue, young people are much more likely to react and then kind of make choices from there. And also if you can, definitely obviously provide those nutritious options at home. Cook, teach your kids how to cook. Oh my god, it's insane how many of us can't. So yeah, there's so much you can do as a parent, but yeah, just don't have like a completely top down, like strict approach with it. Food is supposed to be fun.
I like how you basically said, yeah, you in a roundabout way was be able to communicate on their terms. So make it an injustice, which is exactly what happened with you at 11 years old to start your journey in the first place. So it's almost doing that. You've mentioned a couple barriers and you've mentioned a couple issues. Price, one of them. Another one, fast food companies. Another one, media marketing being flung in our face. Are these your main concerns? Are there any additional ones? And what can we do to combat this?
Yeah, they are my main concerns. I think sports sponsorship as well. When Ronaldo pushed I think it was Coke bottles out the way and replaced it with water, that was a huge moment. But you know, the fact that it was a huge moment says a lot, because we're so used to, you know, sports, you know, F1 or like football clubs being sponsored by Red Bull and Monster and Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all these companies that we just think it's normal. And it's shocking when you think about how much young people consume. And it's so ironic, the fact that, you know, the healthiest, kind of the most, the epitome of what, you know, like healthy means, and the most, they have nutrition teams and they have all this kind of stuff and these people to help them with their diets. These people are now preaching to, you know, young people that they should be eating junk that they wouldn't eat. It's kind of crazy. So that's one of the things that I'm just really like, that really annoys me, because I'm like, you wouldn't eat that, you wouldn't feed that to your kids, but you're telling other kids to eat that. Junk food marketing, we we launched a report that highlighted the fact that kids in the UK get advertised 15 billion ads per year, which is 500 ads per second. Like, it's an insane issue. And there are so many, like, the ban that was supposed to be passed would have added over 270,000 years of extra life for British children. This is literally a life or death issue. Like, the fact that 1 in 3 young people by the age of 11 are at risk of being overweight or obese. That it's not a joke. Like, it genuinely impacts young people's lives and their future prospects. And the fact that all these issues are intertwined, you know, and the fact that our health is never prioritized. It's always profits that are prioritized. And even when we want, like, even just the government that are supposed to protect us and supposed to, you know, kind of champion our rights, even when they're like struggling so hard to pass these bills and pass legislation that will protect the children of the UK, it really makes you kind of angry. And I mean, it does drive me, but at the same time, it's so disappointing. Yeah.
What impact does friendship circles have on this as well? Because I remember, so when I grew up, I was brought up as a vegetarian until I was 12, I think. And my mum and dad didn't have any crisps or sweets or anything in the house. Had like the old chocolate bar, that type of thing. And my mates used to all slag me. They would say, no, I'm not coming round to your house because it's just grains and oats and stuff in the cupboard, right?
Yeah.
And but then I took it kind of upon myself to, although I wasn't cool because I wasn't the kid going and getting sweets, I wasn't the kid going and getting takeaway, I actually ended up taking a little bit of pride in that. I don't think a lot of other kids would. They probably would have rebelled and went off and eaten them anyway. But how important is our social circles when it comes to this? Because there was a social study done, it was in adults, that said that apparently your chances of becoming obese increased by 141% if a friend becomes obese, which is staggering. And that was just a friend. That wasn't even saying a family member or a brother or sister. How important is this when it comes to education in the younger generation?
I think my only concern with that is when you talk about friends, it makes it sound like it's the individual's problem again, when it's actually, you know, the environment, and the fact that, like, culture plays a massive part in it, I think, as well. Like chicken shop dates, for example, or what's the other one? Hot wings and stuff like that, where it's like junk food has become a massive part of young people's culture. So of course it's what's going to be talked about when you're with friends, when you're with, you know, people your age. Like, that's what it is. Oh, did you see, like, this artist, you know, talking about this on chicken shop? Like, that's what it's become. So as much as friends do influence you, their influence comes from their environment. And I don't know, I think it's really interesting you say that. I haven't looked into that at all. But yeah, I think at the end of the day it's systemic. And also what under what kind of circumstances are your friends? Like, is it because you live in the same area? Then you're probably most likely to be in the same food desert, and then you only have the same access to those, like, certain foods that are essentially beige junk food. And so I think that in itself is interesting. But definitely, like, I went to a school in Westminster, and I live in South London in Oval, which is, like, parts of it is a food desert. Seeing the different kind of social groups that I'm in that are in different classes, kind of seeing how we all operate differently. And even just, like, when I go out with this group compared to this group where we go to eat, like, there's a massive difference. But I think that's just because of how low-income families are disproportionately affected by our unjust food system. So yeah.
I think it's incredible that, you know, the way you've laid things out and explained them so succinctly and practically, it makes sense how much of an environmental impact there is on people's nutritional habits. So just thinking about that for a second and touching back to the campaign for school meals, are you surprised that there was such a a resistance to change for that, I guess, when it's quite clearly obvious from the conversation we've been having how important early interventions are, how important environment is for people's food habits and nutritional habits. So are you surprised at how much resistance there was initially to the campaign for school meals?
I was more surprised at the fact that I had to campaign on it because, you know, Jamie Oliver has been campaigning on it for 20 years. Jeanette Ory, another incredible campaigner who was actually a school dinners lady, she was campaigning for over 20 years as well. So the fact that it was even an issue is what surprised me. When I brought it up and when the campaign went viral, there was actually not much resistance because there were people from all over the UK saying, I've had the same experience. I was on free school meals. I felt the stigma. This is not right. But the fact that it's just even like I went to this event with the World Food Programme, and I learned there that free school meals has actually been in place for over 100 years. So the fact that it's still not, you know, accessible to everyone and that it's still not provided 365 days a year is just shocking. And it goes back to this being a taboo conversation because so many people actually relate to the issue of food and not having enough of it, or maybe, you know, not feeling like you're eating right. But because it just wasn't a conversation, young people were suffering. But yeah, when the petition hit like almost 500,000 signatures, I had so many amazing comments being like, I was like this when I was younger. Thank you so much for speaking out on it. And even just what Rashford did in terms of destigmatizing the issue, having, you know, a celebrity like that be like, I was on it and that's okay, did so much to kind of make the issue mainstream and something people feel comfortable talking about.
Do you think that the lack of representation for the people who are directly affected by free school meals in Parliament, do you think that plays a massive factor in this uphill battle that we seem to be facing? Because it seems so obvious, like, you know, it's been going for 100 years and we still haven't got to the bottom of this issue. So I'm trying to think of the things that are causing it to still be a difficult issue. And I'm just thinking off the cuff here. Do you think the fact that maybe the lack of representation for low-income families, for people who are directly affected by these issues in Parliament, do you think that's potentially an issue that causes the difficulty?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's a huge problem because when you look at, and this isn't to be, you know, judgmental or classist or anything, but when you look at the people that are in power, they come from the same schools, from the same kind of environments. I think like half of them have gone to, you know, knew each other before and had gone to the same universities, same colleges. Yeah, so like it's like of course they're not going to understand. Of course there's going to be a lack of empathy. Of course they're not going to care. It's just not a priority for them because they don't even know what it's like. Like you see what some of them are spending on just like, you know, travel and food and whatever on government budgets, and it's like that could easily just, that in itself could be used to, you know, provide for young people. And so I think the lack of,
how does that make you feel, sorry, when you see those numbers and you see the people who you need approval from and the people that can actually, you know, cause real change are in a position to quite easily help, and there's still such friction? How does that must test your resolve?
it really does. Yeah, I can't even put into words how frustrating it is sometimes when there's such a tug of war over the most basic principles. Like all I'm campaigning for is for young people to have access to healthy and nutritious food, and yet it's like such a huge politicized issue that I honestly, like, I don't get it sometimes. Like how can we be the enemy, like as young people? How can it be so difficult to pass something without it seeming like a nanny state political approach? And, you know, I don't know, it doesn't make sense sometimes, but what does give me hope is that throughout my campaigning, particularly, you know, kind of policy making, I've had cross-party kind of support. So people from both Labour and Conservative Party have, stood by me and some of the other young people. Obviously, when it's higher up, it gets a bit more techy, but people like Joe Gideon wrote an article about how junk food marketing should be banned, and so you do have people in places of power using it for using their power for the better, but it's just not happening at a scale large enough. And I just hate how this issue is politicized. That's my biggest thing. Like, it shouldn't be politicized at all. It's not about politics. So yeah.
I've got a question, and then I've got I've got a couple of comments that I want to read out, because I think this will be really really interesting. Vicky, what's a food desert? If you want to explain.
Of course. Sorry, I should have clarified. A food desert is an area, typically a high street, where there's little to no access to fresh, nutritious food at an affordable price, but there's an overwhelming amount of junk food, which junk food means high fat, sugar, salt content products. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've got a really interesting comment from Danny here, which actually kind of goes back to the society and the perception of healthy eating. So I'll read this out, and I'll share something on it as well. So Danny says, I used to have a bad relationship with food. I used to get salads out, or more typically nutritional food out of my bag at college. I used to get criticized for it, like Danny with the salad again. Or if I didn't have salad, then they'd make a comment. But she had a bad relationship with food, and it just added to it and made it feel worse. Is this something that you see, Christina? Because I took part in a dissertation. It was a couple of years ago, and basically the dissertation was about friends and families' perceptions of when we start to eat healthy or go on a fitness journey. And the responses were overwhelming of how negative some of them were. And some of the data and the feedback they got, it was, one, because people didn't really understand it, a bitterness to people wanting to better themselves, jealousy for people potentially wanting to better themselves. Is this anything that you've faced at all?
Yeah, I think there's a certain sense of elitism when it comes to kind of being healthy, and it links to the whole diet culture thing, and it being, about kale and all these like superfoods, and it's not be seen as something that's like accessible to the masses. And I really sympathize with what Danny said, because it is so difficult to just eat right and try to eat right, but also in a way where you don't seem pretentious and you don't seem like you're just trying to I think a cultural change is definitely needed. Put healthy foods in the spotlight, but not in a kind of condescending way. And I definitely do kind of feel it, especially when I turned I went hardcore. I'm not vegan anymore, but I just turned vegan, and all my friends made fun of me. Oh my god. They would say that I eat grass, like that, basically fresh air pie, that kind of stuff. So it was just like I took it for bants at the beginning, but the more I started campaigning about food, it was like, why are these prejudices so prevalent when it comes to prioritizing your health and eating well? And it's because it's eating junk food is what's cool, but we actually need to make nutritious food sexy. That's what it is at the end of the day. We need to make it something that people are like, yeah, I do this, and I feel good about it because it makes me feel good.
I love that. That was mine and Ben's tagline for a while, was make mental health sexy. So we're on the same page.
Same wavelength.
It's so true about that prejudice thing. Danny, I don't even know if you know that. Oh no, you do know this. My nickname by a lot of my mates from school, bear in mind I'm 30 now, and I stopped being a vegetarian when I was 11 or 12. I still get called Hammy by my mates. They start calling me, and I'm 30 years old now because I was a vegetarian. So they're like, Hammy.
Wow.
It's but is this kind of, again, it goes back to this perception, because so you want to take part in exercise, oh, you're a fitness freak, or you're wanting to better yourself spiritually. A lot of people think you've had a breakdown and you're off to find yourself, because really you're just wanting to look after yourself more. There's just this, why there's so, it's fascinating, isn't it? There's so many negative connotations about wanting to better ourselves. Like, people are so judgmental about it. I've got another comment here that I'm going to read out, if that's okay. Couldn't eat at all times when my mental health was bad. My body was crying out for food, but my head was saying I deserve to starve. Thank you for bringing this out in the open. I too grew up on free school meals, and I felt so embarrassed, with the stigma that went with that. Then the other hand, I had my kids wanting to buy your free school meal ticket. That's a really powerful share. Christina, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to pass over to the other guys and see whether anyone's got any questions that they're really wanting to ask you. And I'd love to wrap up by just finding out a little bit more about what we know what the overall mission is, but what you're hoping to happen in the next couple of years to support all the amazing work that you're doing. Lads, have you got anything that you...
Yes, I think you've touched on the junk food ban, but I want to find out a bit more about what's next for Christina. What's the next mission? What's on the horizon that you're campaigning for in the future?
Very excited for the future. There's so much happening. I think my main focus over the next year is the intersect between climate and food. So our food system is very, very taxing on the environment. There's so much waste. The whole process from farm to plate is just it's a lose-lose game at the moment. So seeing how our food system can work for everyone and kind of reinventing it is what I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I think that's the main thing at the moment.
Wow, exciting.
Love that. I just wanted to ask you, and if anything, it's probably just a personal question because I'd like to find out the answer. How do you choose to kind of pick and how do you sort of pick and choose your battles, if that makes sense? Because obviously the area of work you're in, it's so vast and you could go down so many rabbit holes or even Pandora's boxes potentially where it feels like you kind of get to the bottom of it. How do you kind of reserve your energy for the battles that you think you're going to create real positive change in? And almost, I don't want to say turn a blind eye to, because we never want to do that, but there's certain things that you might think, right, I'm going to leave that for another day because this one is more pressing, for example. How do you decide to pick your battles wisely, if that makes sense?
I think the first thing is just accept the fact that we're always ignoring something. Like, you can't be attentive to all the issues in the world right now. And that's okay. People might try to make you feel bad for it, but it is what it is. Like, no one's kind of perfect in that sense. And just focus on what you can change, what you have in front of you. For me, we just launched the Food Accelerator program at Bite Back, which is us talking to 10 different corporates, the likes of KFC, Tesco, and we brought them all at Waddesdon Manor, and now we're just kind of working with them to create better change in their food companies, and things like that. I know these people want to work with me, and I know they genuinely are listening to me. Whereas like a year ago, we turned down Nestle because they were just kind of like they wanted to work with us, but we felt like it wasn't genuine. I feel like vibes and just what you feel from like what you want to work on is so important. Like, if you feel you're not going to give your energy to something, or like they don't, like it's not a good vibe, it's not a good feeling for you, then don't do it. But if you feel that the work is going to be genuine, that you're genuinely excited about, like, opening a laptop and sending emails, which is the most boring part of the job, then do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to want to do it and you're going to want to go for it. So I think what excites you, because as much as campaigning is so important, it should also be really fun, and finding creative solutions is so important. So that's how I choose just what excites me the most and where I feel I'm genuinely appreciated.
Cool. I love that. Thank you for that, because the reason I ask is partly myself, I've experienced this in the past, and I know people who might be listening may also have experienced it. It's quite easy to be bogged down by how much is going on and how much of it can be negative. Like, we watch the news, we see on social media, there seems to be a never-ending amount of fires just burning, and we need to find a way not to let that really bring us down, both emotionally and physically. And I've had times in the past, even more recently with what's going on in Ukraine, or before that with the pandemic, and before that with Black Lives Matter movements, and I can go on and on and on and on. And you see these things, they come trend. I don't want to say trendy, but they're present in the media, and you get bogged down by it. And I'm sure people can relate to this when I say, like, if you allow everything to just consume you and engulf you, then it's just game over. So coming from a campaigner who seems to be always working against a fire, it must be a really valuable skill to be able to pick and choose when to pick, when to fight, if that makes sense. So thanks for sharing that. I really do appreciate that.
Cool. And I do think it's really important that people, like, climate doomism is a term that's come up recently, which is specifically to climate, but it's about feeling so overwhelmed and like there's going to be no future and that there's so much going on. But I think what I said about ignorance is really important. Like, we're all going to be ignorant to something. You don't have to, go on social media with a megaphone and be like, this is wrong and this is, we all know, because we're all in it. We're in the same world, we're in the same environment, we know what's going on. Just do what you can, but also protect yourself and prioritize your mental health, your physical health. You guys know this, but yeah.
We've got another comment which I'd like to turn into a question as well. Sebas wrote, I'm not sure whether this has been spoken about, but I think there should be a middle ground option when it comes to meals, separating the good or bad. As a kid, I think that would encourage them to go for the healthier middle ground option rather than fine line junk or healthy. What's your take on that, Christina?
I think that's a really good point. But I don't think it goes back to me, my thoughts on what healthy means and broadening the horizons on what that looks like. There's a really great organization called Chefs in Schools where they bring in proper restaurant level Michelin star chefs into schools and just cook for the young people and cook with them as well. And they create these amazing burgers and they bring in different kind of cultures and create dishes that aren't seen as healthy, but they are very nutritious. So I think it's not about good or bad at all, I agree. But I think you can make it so that it's just good and in the way that it makes people feel and the way that they engage in it, if that makes sense. Yeah,
100%. Christina, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Absolutely loved that. And just a big thank you. We said a similar thing to Ben when you joined on the call. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. You've been working so hard to get this out here after that epiphany or awakening, whatever it is that we want to call it, when you're 11 years old. And what you're doing just comes from the heart. And I've absolutely no doubt, again, the exact same as what I said to Ben, that although, yes, it's frustrating. Yes, there's a lot to be done. Yes, there's a lot of red tape. Yes, sometimes we want to give up and we want to it to become easier. It's going to be all the more sweeter once you get some of these victories, and I 100% think that you're going to get there, and I think the other boys will agree with that.
100%,
absolutely,
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you for giving us your time today and sharing what you've shared, and thanks for all the work that you do, and you're going to continue to do it. It's invaluable.
Yeah, really appreciate.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Good luck for the future as well.
Thank you so much, Christina. Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We'll need it.